Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for the Q&A, so let me get my hat on, and let's get this started. Alright, first question. What is the weakest bench press you've ever seen someone end up with after running out basic novice linear progression? My squats are at 315 times 5 beltless, and that's in pounds for my non-American followers. And I've deadlifted 405 beltless for an easy single. Yet my bench is stuck at 155 times 5, even while gaining a pound or so a week. Is it possible I actually need more complex programming? It's such a novice weight for the bench. I know girls that outbench me by 50 pounds, but I can't hold a candle to my squat. But can't hold a candle to my squat and deadlift. All right, this one's going to be tough to answer because this individual had said that he also overhead presses 120 for 5. So his overhead press and his bench are very, very close. Now, he has obviously surpassed novice strength levels because he's squatting 315 times 5 beltless, and he can pull 405 beltless pretty easily. The thing is, normally I would say to people, well, you're not gaining enough weight, but he's gaining weight reasonably. In fact, what did he say? Gaining a pound a week, that's 4 pounds a month. So he's gaining muscle and fat. And his overhead press is strong. Usually overhead press can be a weak link in the bench press. So I'm going to say for an individual like this, you're just not necessarily built to bench press. You might have a really shallow rib cage, so a longer range of motion and everything. What I would say to this person, you've got to step back and assess what it is that you want from your training. I mean, it's okay to have a weak bench press. It's okay, because all your other basic lifts are really good. They're nice and strong. They're reasonably strong. Your overhead, your squat, your deadlift, you have a good strength base built. So what I would ask you is, so you're not that good at the bench press. You have something either in your genetics or structure that make you not that great at the bench press. It's not lack of overall full body strength, not lack of gaining weight, not lack of programming. So why is it that you're trying to build your bench press? Are you going to compete with it? Are you going to play football where you're going to be tested on the combine for NFL? Are you going to be a power lifter where you compete in competition on the bench? Or are you just trying to build a really big chest? Well, what I would say to people who is just overall athleticism and strength is perfectly fine. That's just your body's natural balance on a balanced program. If you're wanting to compete in powerlifting, you're going to need to focus on your bench more. It's really simple. You're just going to need to go on a bench-specific program now as an intermediate. That's going to be your best way to resolve this issue. It's what you're going to have to do. If you're worried about chest development, see and look if your chest is lagging behind what you really want. And if this isn't working, the bench isn't giving you what you want out of your chest, maybe start adding in weighted dips or something like some extra deep range of motion, heavy incline dumbbell bench presses, something else to give some extra chest stimulation, because again, you're just not built to bench. But it's going to depend on what's acceptable to you. And the thing is, you can be a successful powerlifter with a weak bench as long as you're just chasing totals in competition. In fact, I know a guy who deadlifts over 600 pounds raw, squats over 500 pounds, but still benches like in the 290s. Benches in the 290s in meets. So, you know, he's not that great of a bench presser, but his squat and his deadlift are really good. So that's what you really have to ask. Why is it that you're that worried about your bench? Is it that important to you? Is it a reason you're wanting to do it, or is it just because you think it should be higher because other people's proportions are better? Their ratios are better. And if that's the case, if that's really bugging you, then go on a bench-specific program. But if you're just chasing overall fitness, athleticism, muscle mass, it isn't the end of the world. I wouldn't worry about it a lot. These are just our individual leverages, individual genetics, individual structures. They are what they are. All right, next question. You got me eating higher carbs, lower fat, and feeling great. Been a while since you did some meal ideas. I'm now eating whole wheat pasta, but miss the cheese. LOL. Any suggestions? How do you eat yours? Yeah, man, I can't put cheese on pasta unless it's like the fat-free cheese, which lately has been hard for me to find. When I check the stores lately at grocery stores I normally shop at, I very rarely see it. And if I do, it's more expensive than I just care to pay for cheese. So it's been hard to find lately, but that would be the only route for someone like me. For me, cheese is an absolute weakness. It's a food that I will overeat so fast that it's mind-blowing. Like I can knock down 1,000 calories of cheese just by itself like nothing. That's why I tend to overeat pizza and stuff. That's why I have to avoid these foods. Remember that, guys. These come down to your individual trigger foods that you know will cause you to overeat, and avoiding those. Now, me personally, I like to add extra fiber and things, and I know that sounds crazy. Adding extra fiber to whole wheat pasta to a lot of people would seem crazy, but is this how you add some variety, get some extra protein, some nutrients in it? I like to do one of two things, sometimes both things. I like to add to my sauce either like kidney beans, which again really complements the nutrition profile, or sometimes I'll just dice up a bunch of vegetables in there like red peppers, like red bell peppers, broccoli, dice up a little bit of broccoli, some mushrooms and things, and cook extra vegetables into your sauce, and it goes great. As far as meats go, sometimes just grilled, diced up chicken breast, because I tend to do a lot of chicken in the oven breast. You can just dice it up fine, mix that into the sauce, or like 97% extra lean ground beef is also a fantastic choice when you're trying to do high carb, high fiber, low fat. Any combination of those sort of things works. You could do one of them or you could do all of them to complement it. It makes it taste better, adds to the nutrition profile, either adds extra vegetables, fiber, protein, things like that. So that's how I do mine, and you can change it up. It's not like you have to stick with just one thing. What I also like to do when I get tired of the red sauces, sometimes I'll go find a really low-fat Alfredo sauce and mix that with pasta, like with either the shell or the panini or whatever, the different ones. Like the low-fat Alfredo with diced up grilled chicken breast actually does really well. That's a fantastic mix for your whole wheat pasta. Those are the things I personally like to do with it to change it up a bit and just complement the nutrition profile. All right, next question. Hi Jason, this is the third time I'm asking this question. If my parents have developed diabetes at some point of time, am I also at risk of developing the same even if I have been working out for nearly a decade now? Thanks and keep rocking, brother. All right, diabetes has a very strong genetic component. If your parents are type 2 diabetic, we know type 2 diabetes is a lifestyle-induced disease, but it does have a strong genetic component. The only people I know who train really vigorously who develop type 2 diabetes, in my experience, have been people who abuse a lot of gear, growth hormone, stuff like that. There's a few people I've met like that, at least one that I've known who used to be a friend, or more of an acquaintance than a friend. A guy I used to know who lifted, who had developed type 2 diabetes up in his 40s, but he had used a lot of gear. Some drugs could contribute, but otherwise you're probably safe. Yes, there's an enormous genetic component, but if you are lifting weights regularly, right, lifting weights cuts your chances of getting diabetes by about 70 to 80%. All right, that's a given. That has been seen in the data. So you're lifting weights, you're cutting your chances down right there. If you avoid getting obese, you keep your body fat, from going higher than about the 20 to 25% range as a male. You also cut your chances in half even further. All right, so you're already there. Right there, you're lifting weights and keeping your body fat at a reasonable level. It cuts you down to about a 10% chance of getting it. Beyond that, your other factors are if you limit your saturated fat intake and limit your fructose intake. And people need to remember, when we say limit things, that doesn't mean you have to exclude them. There's this stupid idea that people get out there that because something in excess can cause harm, that any amount of it causes harm, and that's simply not true. As long as you limit these things to moderation, again, saturated fat, fructose, because honestly, there's a lot of really healthy foods that contain small amounts of each of those, all right? And if you're avoiding those foods to try to avoid them completely, you're really going to not have the best nutrition profile. It's about moderation. Avoiding fructose doesn't mean you can never eat tomato sauces, because tomatoes have a tiny little bit and sometimes in there. Or you have to avoid fruit, you can't ever have a banana. I mean, the absurdity of that. Same thing, saturated fat. Well, there's traces of saturated fat even in nuts. You can never have a spoonful of natural peanut butter because it's got saturated fat. I mean, there's no point to take it to the extremes, but people do that a lot. Don't do that. Just moderate those things. But that's the 4 things you can do to limit it. All right, that's the 4 things you can do to limit your chances of developing it in spite of a genetic predisposition. All right, next question. Hey Jason, regarding sports-specific training, I've been told the big three lifts are useless and have very little carryover to football, MMA, basketball, etc. Training your slings for power kettlebell work plyometrics is superior to lifting heavy weights because the big three are very limited and only provide axial loading. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Really, I know tons of strength and conditioning coaches out there who have their top athletes perform the big lifts. All right, now some of them are more valuable than others, and the point is there is a limit to how strong you get on those of it being a useful thing for your time. Meaning, as I've said before, for example, getting a squat that is more than about double your body weight doesn't seem to be useful for football and field sports. Why? Because most of these athletes can still do all of their sport-specific training, focus on their conditioning, explosiveness, and everything else, and get to a double body weight squat. And going up to about a double body weight squat does seem to impact performance on the field. But when you start going beyond that, you're having to dedicate specific work to increasing your squat, and that specific work can affect your recovery and the time you spend on things that actually carry over better to your sport. They start to negatively affect that because now you're just chasing the squat above doing all your other explosive work, plyometrics, agility work, everything else. Bench press, probably the most useless out of the big three for serious contact sport athletes. And not useless, I just think things like push presses and stuff are better. But this idea that you shouldn't work on big basic strength exercises is simply not true. It's that big basic strength exercises shouldn't be your primary focus, but they are important and they do carry over, particularly things like the squat and the deadlift, the power clean. But for any of these sports, should you be doing a lot of extra explosive work, plyometric speed work, dynamic effort work, explosive lifts? Yeah, you should. Those things are all important. What it really comes down to with a good athletic program for someone you're trying to make into a varied athlete who has a lot of different skills combined together, which you need for American football, you need for MMA, you need for basketball. You need an actual pretty large athletic skill set to be very successful in any of those. It's about balancing the work. That's all it comes down to, is how much energy and effort and recovery you expend on each of those things so that you balance your overall skill set and athleticism. It's ultimately what it really comes down to. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.